everybody, Michelle Thompson here with Shabby Girl Creations, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit about how I shade my artwork. I get a lot of questions about that, so I thought this would be a great time to kind of show you as I'm working on finishing up this piece. So this piece has been painted, and you can see there's already light and dark areas on it. But what I typically do is I have two sets of paint pens. Well, they're not really paint, they're markers, but they're brush pens. So these are Faber-Castell brush pens, and I absolutely love them. They are highly pigmented, they're light fast, and I absolutely love them. You can get them, you know, I bought this whole set off Amazon. I don't even remember how much it was. I think it was like $100, but they're worth every penny because they're absolutely wonderful. And they give you a little bit of time to play with them, but then they dry permanent. My other favorite set of pens are actually watercolor markers by Winsor & Newton. So I have all these fabulous colors that I keep in here. And these are my two favorite sets of pens that I use when I am shading my art for sale. I do have a set of mixed media markers that are in my studio when I teach classes that we use as well. And they're really good too. Anyway, so just to show you, like around here, I actually used my watercolor marker from Winsor & Newton. And I'm trying to see, this one's called Turquoise. I love these because they're double tipped. So you get a finer point on one end and then you get the brush point on the other. I tend to use the brush point the most because it kind of, you know, acts like a paintbrush. One thing that I always do, whether I'm using the Winsor & Newton or I'm using the Faber-Castell, is I always keep a baby wipe on hand to help me just make sure that my fingers may be moist or that the area I'm working on is a little moist to help blend the ink. Now, so I usually just pull off just a little bit. You don't need a whole one because it's really kind of wasteful for that. And on the outside here, I've already done it, but I'm going to show you again. I took the turquoise watercolor marker from Winsor & Newton, and I just kind of went like, you know, made a little mark and then spread it with my finger. But if it's not exactly how I want, you see how it makes it darker, I just can take my baby wipe and then it softens it down just a little bit, okay? And then I just kind of went around the edge here and I did the same thing. This side, I didn't want as dark as the other side. So I went along the edge here and and then you can pull, like you can make a little bit of a mark and then pull some of the ink down. You see, to kind of create that look. I love it. You can do the same thing by just rubbing and pulling up. And I've had these markers for at least a year, if not longer. And I mean, they haven't ran out yet. So, I mean, they're really good. I absolutely love them. I think I got these Winsor & Newton ones, I think I got on sale at either Michael's or Hobby Lobby. So you see, this is kind of creating that look. I'm kind of putting a vignette, if you will, around the subject, but I'm making the darker and the lighter to give it contrast for my shadows in my light areas. I even did it down here. If you notice, I've got gray along the bottom of the vase or the pitcher, and for that I used Faber-Castell warm gray pen, and you see it's more like a fine tip brush pen. Not fine tip, I mean it's finer, but it's still, you know, I can put it on there and I can rub. You see how it gives me a little time to play with it. And I can just rub that in. I can go around the edges with this finer point, and I can even go inside and do this. Now, I created this using a gloss gel medium, so it's a nice waxy area to work on that makes it blend easier. If I don't have that, sometimes I use a regular matte gel, and what I do is I'll just cover this with Mod Podge or a varnish sealer and let it dry, and then I can go back and do this. You need a non-porous surface for this to work best on. They can work on just a regular, your regular canvas, but to get this effect, I have found it much easier when it's a non-porous, kind of a little bit slicker surface. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I want to work on these flowers, because yesterday I worked on the wall and the kind of the table where it sat and the picture vase. Now I want to work on these flowers because they were still drying, and the leaves. So I'm going to go with a darker green. I have two greens. I have a lighter green, which is sap green, and then I have phthalo green. I love phthalo greens. I'm going to try this first. Usually the darker color is right on time with what I'm looking for, and yes, this one is. So what I'm doing is I'm just going around the leaf. If you can see that, I'm just going around it and I'm just rubbing and creating some shadow areas. I don't want to cover the entire leaf, it'll take away the light, but I do want to do some darker areas. Just kind of think about, where is the light hitting your art, your subject in this piece? Where is the light hitting it? Now, I kind of went off onto the gray, and if that bothers you, you can always take your little piece of baby wipe, and you can always just go in there really quickly and wipe it right off. You can do the same thing wherever you put this marker. You can typically, if you go in there within enough time, wipe it off. Now, because I used a texture paste to create these, I've got a lot of good texture, so this is picking it up on some of the higher peaks of the texture paste, which is making it work out just so perfect. Okay, so just keep going on. Go around your little leaves. I would do those first, just for me, because the flowers are going to take me a little longer. And look at the difference already. Look at those two up there versus the three down here, where I've added some contrasting darker elements, some light and darkness to the leaves. It really makes your piece of art stand out. So just keep working on that. I kind of like to do the outside and then rub, and then I go on the inside a little bit and just rub. And it's that easy. Okay, now for my florals. I don't want to cover, again, I don't want to cover the entire flower with this. I just want to add some elements to it. I have three different kinds of pinks. I have like a magenta. This is called quinacridone magenta. I have pale rose, and I have permanent rose. I'm actually going to go with the quinacridone magenta, because what I'm doing is adding the shade, the darker color. I already have it somewhat in my paint colors, but I really want to make a distinction between where these flowers sort of begin and end. So I'm going just around the outer band of some of these roses, or florals, whatever. They could be peonies. They're kind of abstract, so they can kind of be whatever you see in them. And then I'll go around the center a little bit, and I'm just going to add just a little bit of the light, of the dark, of the shadowing. And again, just keep your little baby wipe handy. If you get it on a space that you didn't want it, you can just quickly wipe it off. See, this flower here, I knew was going to be darker because it was toward the bottom of the vase, and it was being really kind of overshadowed by all these others, so I can do more on this one. This one, especially this one here at the top, I want to keep this section as light as I can, so I am going to really just kind of cover in, kind of in between this flower and the flower that's kind of overlapping it. Okay? And so I'm finding that my shadow in this one is more on the right side, and the lighter element, of course, as you can see, is on the left. And again, I'm just putting this around here. And I tend to use these watercolor markers more when I'm just doing the pinks and the greens and the blues. And when I need my colors that I don't have in the watercolor, I use the Faber-Castell, and I think it's because these are just so easily they're easily translucent. I don't know how to say it. They blend so easily, which the Faber-Castell do too as well. But I think also because I have the fatter brush tip on these, I just tend to use these more. And I want you to see, I mean, what a difference we're already getting in the artwork. So let me push that up a little bit so you can see it. I mean, look at the difference between this flower and these other flowers. What a difference. So before you begin creating, think about where your light and dark elements are going to be in your artwork. And then that'll give you a better idea about when you go back in to maybe add a little bit more contrast. And as I said, I don't want to overdo it because that's going to defeat the purpose. I think that's perfect. And so that's really it. That's all I did over this whole entire piece. I chose different brush pens to create some light and dark elements. I also did it when I was painting with the paint, but for me, I like to go back in and really enhance it more with the brush pens. I feel like I have a better control. I can do some more blended, softer, more translucent elements here and there and just give it a really unique look. So this piece is finished. Because I used the watercolor pens, I'm going to let this dry overnight. And then when I do go over it with the sealer, I'm going to be very careful because, you know, watercolor paints and things like that, they get activated when you use water, hence their name. So when I go over with the sealer, I'm going to have to be very careful. So I'm going to do my flowers very carefully and probably let them dry. And then I'm going to seal the outer area here very carefully and let it dry, just so it doesn't bleed into the other sections. That is the only downfall, if you will, that I found by using the watercolor markers. The Faber-Castell pens dry permanently and I never have to worry about it. But to me, it's worth it. It's worth the extra steps to use the watercolor markers because I absolutely just love them and I love the look that they give. So that's it. That's just a little bit of shadow, adding dimension to your art. I hope that it helped you.